Power Nation. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Women in Leadership. I'm so excited to have with me a colleague and a great friend, Dr. Sharmayne Jenkins. Welcome.
Oh, wait, hello. I'm like, all right, I'm being formal here. I need to rename myself on this daggone. Wait a minute. I want to be doctor too, daggone it.
You are a doctor.
I mean, you know, I wanted it. Watch this. Bam.
So, Dr. Jenkins, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and where you are in life right now?
Yeah, once I change my name, there we go.
Lord.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Banks. Thank you for having me here. So yes, as you noted, I am Dr. Sharmayne Jenkins. And, you know, it tickles me to say, only because it's new, but because it's so pretentious in many ways. But, you know, unfortunately for some people, that finally gives you value, right? Like, they're willing to listen to you. So we'll use it in this moment for the people who need that, you know, to maybe be willing to hear what I have to say. So I have a coaching and personal development company, Reinvention Solutions it's called. Everything I do is around reinvention at different stages, and not just personally, but organizationally. So I have been called the artist of reinvention. I take to that because that's what my life looks like. So a lot of what I've been doing up to now is really in two funnels. I had the personal coaching, which I had really started to move away from, but I am coming back to it now that I can really devote more time to my personal passion, because I think even personal development is what develops organizations, right? They're just a lot of people in there, hopefully working towards a common goal. But if I can shift your mindsets and the way you think and look at yourself and who you are and why you show up the way you show up, then you become more effective in all areas of your life. So even when I do professional one-on-one coaching, it's really personal coaching. And I tell them that, because if you're still up here and worried about your grandmama and how she's looking at you, then you're not going to perform well. We need to get into it, right? So organizationally and in educational settings, I do a lot of stuff around social emotional factors and interrupters, right? I'm an interrupter. I'm a disruptor.
No, not you, Sharmayne.
Go figure. And I just listened to T.D. Jakes' book, Disruptive Thinking, a week or two ago, and it really solidified for me that was okay. Because sometimes, you know, even when people ask you to be that for them, they become very resentful of you.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so much more when they didn't ask you for it. All right. So I oftentimes step into spaces and I'm in a commitment at this point because I know that's who I am called to be in many ways. I'm just trying to work on how I do it a little bit. Sometimes I don't feel the need to change. I'm very Dr. Philiana Van Zandt. I'm not Marianne Williamson in my approach, you know. So I talk a lot about the social emotional aspects of businesses. What does that look like? And schools. And schools is really where my heart is. But what does that look like? It looks like leadership trainings from a humanistic standpoint, like learning to understand personality types, your own mindsets, empowering and disempowering mindsets that will impact your goal setting and how you approach circumstance, situations, people, what your interpretations will look like. It looks like teaching the various ways of how people can appreciate people. What does appreciation look like? And the many different ways it can look. So when you're trying to let your staff know that they matter and you see them, you can learn to do it in a way that impacts them. It can look like learning to apologize. What does apologizing really look like? There's different components of apologies. That's why when some people swear they apologize, other people are like, no, you didn't. If you wasn't really sorry, if you were sorry, you would have. And then they got all of this stuff. So there's ways to apologize so that you cover all of the factors and to ensure that somebody understands you apologize. It looks like a lot of work around bias, implicit bias, narratives. What's the story you tell yourself about yourself? What's the story you tell yourself about other people? Right?
So I'm going to stop you right there because you're giving us a lot of information here. But one thing that definitely stood out to me is as you talk about walking in purpose and doing work that is purposeful. Can you tell me a little bit about how you discovered what your purpose was?
I keep tripping over it or letting other people tell me. So, and it's the God's honest truth. So for me, I think, and I don't think I'm alone, I had a vision for who I was, what I was supposed to do on this earth very, very young. And I thought that was the only thing I was supposed to do. And that was to be a hairstylist. From 8 years old, I knew I wanted to be a hairstylist. If you look at my high school yearbook, it's going to say cosmetologist under my picture because I learned a better way to say hairstylist at that point. Man, when I was young, they was calling them beauticians, and I knew then, absolutely not. That does not sound sexy. So I knew I wanted to do hair. That's what I wanted to do. That's all I thought about doing. And that's all I saw for myself. And even in that, it was very narrow. I was going to be a salon hairstylist. And my biggest goal was maybe to own a chain of salons and, work in them, not even just like run my business. I would be doing hair. That's my thing. Everything that I've done with my life outside of that, somebody else suggested to me.
So you did become a cosmetologist.
I did. So when I left high school, my mother, no parent dreams of their child becoming a hairstylist. It's gotten a little sexier now, and people look at it as a viable career path. But when I was young, nobody said, baby, when you grow up, you should be a hairstylist. And nobody clapped for it either. And so when I left high school, my mother helped me get into this program at the Bank of New York, where it would supposed to take exceptional high school students, because I was, and put them on a management path. And probably minority students was probably thrown in there too. So I went to work at the Bank of New York in the free bond redemption section, handling all these people back then, everything was very manual, handling all these people's bonds and dividends, and looking at all this money. And I was getting that whole $150 a week. And I was miserable. And God is good. He had them fired after a year and a half, and me taking off a whole summer with mono. So listen, I wanted off a weekend to go hang with friends. They told me no, they needed me there. I ran back from Philly, came in that Monday, throat felt scratchy. They sent me to the nurse. I had mono. My mom was the supervisor of a blood bank at a hospital. It's crazy how my blood test all summer for like 3 months came back with mono. And they had to pay me because when they sent me home back then, it only counted as one sick day. And since they sent me home, I got paid all summer because God is good, you heard? So later that year, they tried to accuse me of leaving a bond or something on a copy machine, which I didn't do. And they went to fire me. And I was so happy. And when I was sitting in that room, I could see them trying to make me cry. they kept saying stuff and saying stuff and saying stuff. And I was like, when can I get out of here? When can I get out of here? And so they fired me. And guess what? I got unemployment. And guess what I did? Went to cosmetology school where I really wanted to go. I had headaches the last 3 or 4 months when I worked there. I had a
How
headache.
did your mom respond though? Like I know a lot of times parents kind of push their kids into careers that they think are most appropriate or are going to be you know, financially stable for them. But then the students end up, and again, you know, I worked in higher ed and I've had students, a ton of students majoring in accounting, majoring in nursing, and they hate it. They absolutely hate it. And 9 out of 10 times they fail out. You know, I've had students change their major and it's not until like the week before graduation that they come in and they're like, well, when you read my name on the graduation stage, do you also say my major? Because I don't want my parents to know that I changed from accounting to IT. You know, so
Listen,
how did your mom respond?
I don't know, because I didn't care. It is what it is. I tried to do what you wanted me to do. I was miserable. It was cute in the beginning because I was working on Wall Street, and I graduated high school at 17. So I put my hair in a good bun. I bought a nice, sensible little shoe and put on clothes, and I felt I was grown. And I found this whole world called the after work party. And I'm so old, the age to get in bars and stuff was 18 when I was young. So it was on and popping. So I felt good and grown. But once that wore off, I was so unfulfilled and so unhappy that it wouldn't even have mattered to me. She might have said something, I don't know. And I didn't care because I knew I needed to do what I needed to do. And my mother wasn't happy about my decision, that I know, until her best friend decided to go to cosmetology school. And she had her real job. She was like work for the Long Island Railroad or something. But she decided to go, and she was telling her she's good. She's good. And then she was like, maybe. And this is somebody, my mother had a Jerry curl. That's how long ago this was. So she didn't like it, but what she couldn't do. And what I think is really good about my mom, I always said my mom, you know, I'm born in the 60s. My mother was kind of flower childish. And, you know, theme songs were like, it's your thing, do what you want to do. And my mother really kind of embraced that. And when I was 18, she said, I can't tell you what to do anymore. I can only give you advice. So I'm 19. She can't tell me what to do because those are her rules. And so I went to cosmetology school. I was super happy. I was finally aligned. I got out thinking I was going to go straight to Fifth Avenue and be, you know, a top hairstylist, and, you know, found out that wasn't the way.
Big dreams.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, because I'm always coming out on top. Well, I, you know, start at the bottom. Who me? Not never. And you know, but you in certain salons, most you have to be an assistant first, and then you know, you work your way up. And I was like, no, I got a temporary license. I want to be a stylist. And they was like, get out of here. So I ended up working for my mom's hairstylist, a couple of blocks from my house in South Jamaica, Queens. And then a salon opened up in a mall out here, Green Acres Mall on the edge of Long Island and Queens, 50 stations. And God is good. It was in the back of the mall, and I happened to park in the back to go to the mall and saw it. And I walked in, and it was about 7 white stylists. It had just opened that week. And I said, y'all do black hair in here? And they were like, yeah. I said, good, then y'all probably need black stylists. And they were like, yeah, yeah, we do. And I started working there, and I worked both for a while because I needed to be under a black stylist who wasn't really that good, but she taught me a lot of what not to do. And she was super popular, but I used to watch her cutting hair and be like, no, ma'am. Because I also went to a white cosmetology school. So there were a lot of black ones, but I didn't choose it. So I had a whole different framing. And whites are heavier on cutting, right? Blacks back then were heavier on styling. They'd
Right,
do
right.
something, they'd be patting your hair, pushing it into something. It wasn't a haircut that was going to fall into the shape. It was, I don't know if you ever saw your grandmother, they put the rollers in and then they comb it back
Mm,
and they push it forward and all
yeah.
that. So I call it do or dodge or camouflages, right? They weren't really into creating the shape like they were in the white schools. So I stayed there so I could learn certain things to do and not to do. And I worked at this white salon where I got to do white hair, which I was super comfortable with, but I also got to do the blacks because they were from Jersey and didn't realize that Valley Stream neighbors South Jamaica Queens and Southeast
Mm,
Queens. So they thought they were going to have all these Long Island white people come in. That salon within 2 years was 80% of the clientele was black. And I was their main money earner. So when I got there, I liked learning and I missed school. So I said, I'll go to the local college over here and just take a couple of classes because I need to stay stimulated. And I started taking classes. And at some point, I was like, I guess I should declare a major because I'm taking these classes and I let my clients decide what my major was going to be because college was of no interest to me. I just liked learning and I
mm.
needed to be in that kind of environment. So they picked a business major for me
Which
because
made
they
sense
said,
because, if you decided to follow through with that goal of having a chain of salons, you need the business experience.
yeah, I mean, and they were thinking job, which was never my thing, but psychology was my passion. And if I'd have known back then that I could have had a double major, I would have did that. So I really took all the business classes and I took all the psych courses. And I got my, bachelor's and I met my husband my first semester there. And by the time I graduated, I was married and had a 2-year-old.
Oh,
Right, fast.
okay.
I was
So let's
21 when I
talk a little
started
bit
college.
about that because, as we focus specifically on our podcast on women in leadership, how did all of that work for you? Having a husband, having a small child, building your career, you were in school while you were doing all of that. How did you manage everything?
It never felt like a big deal to me. It never felt like a big deal. Um, as I get older, I think I've made things more of a big deal, and now I'm getting away from it again. Somebody told me the other day because I'm putting together a retreat, and they're like, we're gonna get help. I was like, it's not a big deal. Like, it don't take that much. You always say that, Sharmayne. I said because that's how I feel. When you break stuff down, it usually ain't that big a
Right.
deal, right? So back then, it was what it was. When it became a thing for me was when my mom died. So my world came crashing down and how I approached life crashed when my mom died. So I was 25, my daughter was 14 months old. I was living with her voluntarily. I tell people all the time, I love my mother so much. When I got married, we got an apartment before we got married. I wouldn't move in it. I kept making up excuses. I'm not moving until we hang some chandeliers. I'm not moving until you can't. Like, it was fully furnished. I was still looking for reasons. And finally my husband was like, listen here, I'm leaving. Because I guess he got tired of being in my twin bed in my room. I was very happy because I was with my mother. And I
So the
moved.
three of you were staying with your mom.
It was only two of us. I got married. First comes love, then marriage, then comes in the baby carriage. But it was
Okay.
me and him in the twin bed at my mother's house with a whole apartment and
Waiting for you that you're paying for.
paying for. And so after 3 months married, I moved into the apartment. And then 8 months into our marriage, I got sick. And I found out I was pregnant. And I was like, I can't drive all the way to Brooklyn. I'm sick. I can't take it. I'm just gonna stay at my mother's house.
Anything to stay with mommy.
For tonight. And I never left. And we
Wow.
paid that rent for a year. We only lived there 5 months. So now I had the baby and And his cousin came to visit and came in the back and saw we was in the twin bed. Twin bed, I was happy, you hear me? Pregnant, had him squished against the wall. I was happy. And so I told him, just give up the apartment, man. Like, take the stuff. I'm never moving there. I don't want to leave my mother. They went and got our bed and I was there. But God is good because I didn't know my mother was dying. She was terminally ill then. They thought she had ulcer, impacted bowel, all kinds of stuff. And she had cancer. And so we were actually buying a house when we found out that she only had a few months to live. And so I backed out of the deal. And we had everything. We had 10% down to them to hold it. The lady tried to keep my money. It was a whole thing. And I was like, I don't even care. Like, but what I'm not doing is moving out of here while my mother's sick. And so
are you an only child?
I'm an only child.
Okay.
Of an only child, of an only child, of an only child.
Wow. Okay.
My daughter's 5th generation only child girl. If we don't count all them kids, my ex-husband went and made after. So there's no family, there's no whatever. I don't particularly like my grandparents. It was what it was. It was me, it was her. And it was my daughter. My mother's name was Christine. My daughter's name is Kristen. Right. So I need people to understand, like, this is what it is for me. And so when my mom died, like, our arrangement was I went to school full time during the day. I worked in the salon in the evenings and on Saturdays. And my ex-husband, who is still in retail, so that's a wonky schedule as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in school in the daytime, God sent me my friend's mother to be a babysitter, Mrs. Miller, an angel sent from heaven, who watched her in the day, and my mother would pick her up and then watch her in the evenings so I could go to school and work. So when my mom died, I thought I would have to drop out of school, right? Because I needed, I would then
Picking
like
the baby
switch
up
to,
from Miss Miller, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would switch to doing hair in the day because, babysitters generally, they'll put your kid on the porch, at 6 p.m. or whatever. So I would just have to do hair in the day, and then I would get her and I would do. And Miss Miller was like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. You'll never have to worry about her as long as I'm around.
That's a blessing.
And let me tell you something, $60 a week. I think it was 40. And at some point she was like, I think I gotta go up. And so when my daughter turned 3, and even late at night, sometimes she'd be like, it's too late for you to take baby. Just bring some more clothes tomorrow. Like, she covered me. And so that took a lot of the worry away too, right? Because my biggest worry at that point would be how to ensure that my daughter was well cared for.
Right.
Right. And so when she was 3, it became preschool in the day. And then I would pick her up and Miss Miller would watch her in the evenings. Right. Unheard of by most.
So during all of this time, how are things with you and your husband going?
We weren't good as soon as my mom got sick because I didn't have my mother to tell me to stop acting like stupito. I told my daughter recently, the only reason me and your father didn't make it is because my mother wasn't alive, because we didn't have good counsel in our lives to say, you acting stupid, which she told me damn near every day, right? Because I knew I had issues from coming from an abusive household with my father, and I was deflecting onto him, projecting onto him, and then making interpretations about how he was behaving, and making up stories that weren't true. But I also married somebody who I didn't feel like was a threat, right? I didn't have to worry about him being out. I didn't have to worry about him hitting me. If he hit me, I knew I'd probably be able to beat his behind or whatever. And that was my feeling back then. He was very meek. And I said that once on a TV appearance, and I had to switch it because I didn't want to sound like a sucker, but I picked somebody that wasn't threatening to me. But here's the thing, he let me run everything, which was fine for me because now I feel like I'm in power and da 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 da. It's a protective
Mhm.
mode. But when my mom got sick, I was like, yo, I need you to step up. And he was over there being who he was. And I was so angry, but I was angry at the world, right? Like I was angry at the entire world and God. And so my thing became with him, I was okay with handling everything. But when I can't handle it, I need you to handle it. And if you're not going to handle it, what I need you around for? If I got
Mm.
to handle everything, do the good and the bad, then I might as well be by myself.
So,
So
so a lot of women go through that emotion, right? Where they have a man, and I think it's learned behavior, if you ask me. I'm always talking about strong Black woman syndrome, right? So we learn this behavior that, you know, you got this, right? You can do this. You can do it on your own. But it seems like you actually were then where we're starting to be now, where you had gotten to a point where you were vulnerable and you actually needed help, and did not get it. Where I think a lot of women are usually stuck in that whatever, I got it, I got it, I got it, I got it. And they never really get to that point where they can even acknowledge the point that I don't got it and I need a little bit of help.
yeah, I don't think it's a learned behavior. I think it's a fear-based behavior. I think it's a survival tactic. Um, I think it is indicative of how wounded people are. I think it comes from a lack of trust. It's not that you learned to step up that way. It became your default when you started feeling like all you have is you.
Well, I think you also look at your parents, right? You even mentioned you grew up in probably not the healthiest environment, right? And so your mother did what she had to do, right? It wasn't like she was just going to lay in the bed and not get up and provide for you. She did what she needed to do. And so I think, our daughters are watching us, so if I see my mommy breaking her back and, carrying all the groceries and she's the one out there shoveling the snow and, yeah, it would be really great if somebody helped me do those things, but I got it if I have to have it.
So I'll say a few things to that. One, so my mom had polio, right, when she was young. So my mom had a lot of physical issues. One of her legs was about 3 or 4 inches shorter than the other one. It was very underdeveloped and atrophied. She had about 18 surgeries. Um, there was just a series of things. And then within that, she had cancer about 5 times, right? My mother never looked like toil and stress. And my mother cried in front of me like it was us, right? But let me tell you what my mother did. My mother worked 2 jobs. She was the supervisor of the blood bank during the week. She was a lab tech on Saturdays. But you know what else she did? Went bowling every Saturday evening because that was her thing. She had her bowling league that she went to every Saturday. Wednesday night was the fish fry night at the Skylark and whatever, like we were always back then, people just stopped at people's houses. Sundays, we went to somebody's house and you kikied and you had dinner and you went on picnics. I always saw balance with my mother, number one, that way. And I never saw my mother play victim. Not never. Not
Mm.
never. And she had every reason to play victim, right? So that's one thing. So I don't know what I learned from her around that stuff, right? Because I watched her be abused. She only left, I think, at some point because I told her I was leaving. I was 12. I was like, this life don't work for me. I'm gonna go live with my grandparents because I don't think I'm supposed to be subjected to all of this. This too much.
Hmm.
And that was her impetus for leaving because she stayed because she thought it's what I wanted. Because you want to have your family and father. And when I was like, peace, she, reevaluated everything. And there's so much I went through, but I feel like my mother, right? like um, beaten, but not bound. You know, more was available. But I think that it's more than what I always say, that I feel like people parent from their pain, right? And I think a lot of women, so again, you know, I'm a little older, so I was born in segregation, and I was born when women didn't have rights. And so I grew up at, through the beginnings of desegregation, and I was there when women's rights, when women got the right to vote, get credit, like literally you couldn't get credit without a
Without your
man.
husband's
You
permission.
couldn't do
Right.
this
Right.
without a man. You couldn't do that without a man. And so a lot of women from that era, their message became, make sure you don't need no man, right? When they got that birth control pill, they started flinging the
Right.
coochie
Right.
around.
Right.
You know, when they could get some credit, they felt a little more powerful. When they felt like they had a vote, when they felt that they could create some kind of economic stability and they weren't bound financially, and that they could have a socioeconomic, they could create new levels for themselves socio and economically, and in the social status, right? They started teaching their kids, don't you ever, the girls particularly, make sure you keep your own money and don't ever need to have to depend on no man fully, and make sure you can do that, and make sure they were parented from their pain. Anything taken to extreme becomes error.
Right.
Right. So this message was forged in us. Don't, make sure you don't need no man for nothing. Make sure, and even when you go out, make sure you have this so you can leave him, and there was no balance there.
So do you feel
Because
like your mother was throwing out those messages, or you feel like she took a very different approach?
I don't, I think my mother never concerned herself, as I can recall, about that part. My mother really wanted me to feel free, right? My mother took great glee in watching me have an ordinary, regular teenage life, right? Because my family's from New Hampshire, and they were the only Black family that ever resided in the town of Bartlett, New Hampshire, unless somebody has come there since the early 2000s. When the last time I went, I took my daughter up there and I talked to the people. I've never had another Black family once we left there after 3 generations. And so what did that look like for my mother, right? Polio in this white town where the people had taken a lot of my grandmother's land, forced her to relinquish most of the town. She owned most of the town because her white adoptive parents bequeathed it all to her, and the founding fathers couldn't stand it. And so who do you have to be when you have to, when you're around these white people and you have to survive?
Mm-hmm.
When you're handicapped and you want to be seen as normal. I think my mother wore a lot of masks, and I think that the big thing for her was that I would be able to, and then the abuse, and then that I could just have a normal, free life. She wanted me to be fully expressed. She wanted me to find myself, and men never really played into that conversation. Now, my first real boyfriend was terrible. I was with him for 6 years. Loser then, not gonna, who knows if you'll see it now, don't know what he is, but it's not, I still, from what I know, and the limited interaction, isn't a man I would want to and need to be with at this time. And my mother knew it. And I was like, you're a hater. My mouth was crazy back then. You just don't want me to have
Back
anybody
then.
because you don't have anybody. Blah, 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 blah. Right? So she knew things that I didn't know, as all mothers do. And so she tried to steer me that way. But I didn't want to hear anything she had to say. But she never put on me what it was supposed to look like.
When you think about how you parented your daughter, Would you say you took a similar approach, or were you the opposite?
I was a lot the opposite. But listen, I even told my mother at some point, you need to step up a little more, honey. I need a parent. Stop letting me just be out here all willy-nilly. I don't know how I didn't do a lot of things. I don't even know how it turned out, how I turned out. I wasn't having no sex. I don't do drugs. I never did drugs. I never did a lot of things. I don't know how that happened, because I could have, and she would have figured, oh, what you gonna do? Right. But with my daughter, I was very intentional about a lot of things, and I held her very, very close. Um, and I got to bring up my mother again. I think part of the reason is because I was 25 when my mother died,
Mm.
right? And so I was super capable. I started working from 14 because my mother was going through so much. I didn't want to be a burden. So I worked full time from 14 years old at the 7-Eleven after high school, right? And brought in my same money I was making at that bank in New York, that $150. It didn't look the same. But I was like, I'm gonna buy my own. I remember I wanted shoes for first day high school, 10th grade. I started high school in 10th grade, and I wanted these shoes. My mother was like, I'm not spending no $35 on no shoes for you or whatever. And I was like, heard you, right? So let me go get a job. I don't have to worry her about these things. I get that she's going through a lot, and she's doing a lot. Like, I was very clear on the cost of being a parent in many ways, right? So I'm going to alleviate some of this. So by the time my mother died, like I said, I was already buying a house. I was 25. I had $30,000-$40,000 in the bank in 1988, 89, right? Like, my mother used to be like, you can squeeze a penny. I was making about $1,000 a week doing hair back then, ex-free damn near, I had money. My ex-husband was making $800-$900 a week. Nobody even believed at our age that we were making the money we were making, right? He very early moved up in that retail market. And when you're a store manager, he works in electronics, you would get a commission off the store. And even when he was sales, you got the commission. We were doing good. And I was responsible from very young. So what I realized when my mother died was like, yo, and my best friend at the time wasn't. Like, she was, always needed somebody to help her with. If it wasn't me, it was her mother and her parents. And I was like, yo, what if I die young? Because both my parents are 47 when they died, right? They died 2 months apart. So that could be my destiny. I might die young. And I need to know that I have a child who can take care of herself. If I should die young, I'll never rest in peace. If I died and my daughter needed other people to ensure that she has stability.
How old is
So
your daughter now?
I'm sorry, my
How
daughter,
old is?
she'll be 35 next month.
Okay.
And let me tell you what, she takes care of herself. People be like, what does she do for a living? I was like, I don't even know. I finally know now. What I do, whatever she does enough of it to not ask me for nothing, which is what I needed to see, right? And a few years ago, she almost got laid off from this job, and they called her. And so she was like, I got a heads up, I'm going to get laid off, which they didn't. Well, they tried to, but God is good. He made some things work, and she ended up getting transferred. But here's the thing. She's going to go through this. So she's like, so you said I should have at least 6 months of my expenses saved up, right? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, I got that. And you said I should have this. And I swear I had to cry freedom tear, because I realized that she had been listening, and she was being responsible, and she was taking care of herself.
Job
Right.
well done.
She wasn't out here tricking. And my daughter likes to travel internationally. Sometimes I'll be like, where did you get that shirt from? She's like, Target. I was like, Target? I didn't bring you up shopping in no Target. She said, that's what my budget accommodates, Mom. I said, like, go ahead with your Target shirt, right? Because I bought her a Flossin jig on the cover of Fortune, right? That's how she came up. So I'm like, you shopping at Target and H&M? I didn't do that to you. She's like, that's what my budget says Target. I said, keep it going.
And
But what
there's
she
nothing
had,
wrong with Target or
I'm
H&M.
not saying it
No,
is.
I know.
Maybe,
I'm not
maybe
saying
I'm
you
not.
are.
Maybe I
I'm
am.
just looking for some sponsorship here. You know,
Yeah,
Target, we love you, Target. We love
go
you.
get them. Listen, they really supporting Black designers and stuff now. Listen, I go in Target for things, but it wasn't how I thought I'd shop. I used to be a very conspicuous consumer. I still got a little of it in me, but I was a label whore. I kept my daughter, she grew up in Benetton. She had a Coach knapsack for her school bag. You know, she got her first Tiffany set for her grade school graduation. Like, we was, you know, my mother used to call it, what she used to call it? Oh, I can't think of it. Ghetto fabulous. You know, so, and so there was just a certain way that she was brought up. So I didn't even know how it entered her mind to shop at Target. Now, I taught her about the red signs in Macy's. I taught her about those, right? But I realized that she was a responsible person who was making responsible, and if I would die, she's going to be okay. That's
Job well
all I
done.
ever
Like
want.
I said, job well done. I think
Yeah.
as parents, that's what we want. We want to know that should something happen to us, we have prepared our kids to be able to function in this world and thrive, not just function, but thrive.
And that was
So that
parenting from my
job well
pain,
done.
though, right? I was parenting from my pain.
Right.
And I think that a lot of, you know, sometimes it works out for you, sometimes it doesn't. Don't think we don't have some kind of, we got our issues,
We all
right,
do.
around certain things, but some of that is parenting from my pain. You know, my daughter has weight issues. I know she got them because of me, because I was always so weight conscious because people put it on me. If you didn't have that little stomach, you be cute. If you could just get rid of, and, you know, being uber thin was big back then, Twiggy and all of that. And so I didn't even realize that I was like a 7 juniors and thought I was fat because I was always soft. You know, now it's an asset. People are like, ooh, they like, ooh, you're so soft.
Ah,
But back then, you know, it was a thing. If you just got rid of that, if you just don't, and so I know that that came to her, and she went in the other extreme, you know, around it, and the sneaking food and this, that, and the other thing, and all of that. So my pain there created issues for her. Parenting from my pain and other issues supported her in, you know, in becoming some of the great things that she are. It also is the foundation for a lot of the things that don't work. Right, for her, the stuff that works and stuff that doesn't work. So I think it's a vicious cycle. I think everybody does it because I don't care if it's, I'm not going to make them eat vegetables, because I never liked when my parents used to force me to eat vegetables, and then your kids' bones are snap, crackling, and popping. You know, because they living off of bonbons and fish fillet or whatever, you know. Or if it looks like I'm going to make you a super productive human being that can take care of themselves because I don't want you to be caught out there if I die. You know, it still comes from the same place. You're trying to make sure they don't suffer the things that you felt like you suffered. That's why disciplining has changed, right? That's why a lot of things have changed. And I don't know that it's a good, bad, or right or wrong, but I know that we should really start to be mindful of why we take the approaches we take in all pieces of our parenting, and see what it says about us, right?
So I'm trying to like fit everything into the consolidated time that we have, and I have like
Part
50
two
more
coming next
questions
week.
that I want to ask you. But how did you cope with losing your mom?
I can't say that I did a good job of it. I realized years later, because so my mom's death was sudden, right? We found out that she had this cancer that had metastasized through her whole torso in like May or June, and she was dead by September 2nd. And it was a rapid decline, and it was terrible. And I was lost for a long time. And sometimes feel lost now, right? Because she was so much my rock. So I had a 14-month-old. That's the only thing that I think that kept me going. Because guess what? She don't know. anything about grief, emotions, and this and that. She needs stuff, and she needed me. And so that, I think, is what kept my head just above water. I realized later that I probably had a mini nervous breakdown, and I wasn't really in a good space for about 2 or 3 years, right? Just going through the motions, but also because I hadn't designed a life that allowed me to grieve, right? And so I was a hairstylist, and as all who know me, and many probably figured out in just this little time on here, my persona is very vibrant, alive. I'm a big personality. And part of why people came to me to get their hair done was to be surrounded by that energy. And I was committed to making people feel good and this and that. And, I wasn't good. And nobody cared. And I did hair
Mm.
a lot. It was long hours because I wanted to or because I was greedy. And, you know, just when I was trying to figure myself out a little bit, my father died. And my father died, it was 2 months later. And as you know, my father died under really, really horrendous conditions, set on fire, had become homeless, living in a park, set on fire while he was sleeping, and told the police to get me. I had a lot to deal with. I wasn't doing a really good job of it, and nobody cared. So I had a client, and she said to me one day, "Don't nobody come here for this shit. You need to get yourself together." Nobody cared. If you don't show up here as this person that makes us comfortable, it's going to be a problem. So the story I told myself, and I talk about narratives a lot, and they change. And the story I told myself was really that you don't matter. And so your feelings don't matter. Your pain doesn't really matter. And you just have to show up for everybody else the way they need you to, which aligned with, my home life, right? In many ways. So what I ended up doing, I was in my last semester. My mom died 2 days before my last semester of undergrad. And so I finished it out for her, because remember, I'm doing hair. I didn't need no damn degree, but she was super happy about the fact, because all your parents, they want the kids to get this damn college degree. I finished it for her, right? And then my father dies, and I'm just there, and I'm just doing it. And after it ended that January, I packed up and I went to Europe for about a month. And I hopped from country to country, and I let myself experience my experiences. And people didn't want me to do that. How you gonna? Because my daughter's she a year and a half. She might be 18 months by then. How you just gonna leave your baby, and how you gonna leave your husband like this? And I got on that plane, and back then there was no cell phones. You used to have to go to a little call center, collect call from. So I didn't have to worry about people getting in touch with me and guilting me, but I understood I had to take care of myself. And there's this adage that you don't need to keep setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm, right? And
I love
so,
that. Repeat that again.
oh yeah, I got a million and one liners now, but you don't have to set people on fire to keep yourself warm. And that's what women do a lot, right? At the detriment of themselves, they try to sit here and regulate how other people feel. They don't let it be other people's responsibility for how their life looks and how they show up. They take it all on. And I was unwilling to, because I was really unable to. I had to leave. I had to leave them customers that wanted me to smile in their face. I had to leave the little husband that was sitting there looking at me, what I'm supposed to do now, what I'm supposed to do now. I left it all. I went away. I shopped like crazy. I went to 8 different countries. I cried. I did me. I had room to breathe. And then I came back home, and I was a little better, at least because I had allowed myself some self-care, and everybody tried to make me feel bad.
Before you continue, I just want to share that I totally understand that feeling of nobody cares.
I think a lot of people do.
What I'm realizing though is that although we feel like nobody cares, they may not be able to express it in a way that we receive it. A few weeks back, we took a break from season 1. We're recording season 2 now, but I put out the weekly sunflower seeds, and those were not supposed to stop. They are supposed to go every week consistently. And there were just 2 weeks that I could not find the energy in me to do it. It was just like, and it wasn't until I received an email, and the last sunflower seed I did, I had to speak about it and speak on it, because it just felt like I'm running. And when you're the coach or you're the instructor and everybody's expecting you to bring that positive energy, right? They want this larger than life personality. You're the person who's supposed to be cracking the jokes and making everybody laugh. And when you don't have it in you to do that, like, what do you do? Right? Who do you turn to? And I think that's so important as women, that we have to be able to have people that we can turn to. And I'll just share openly that I really view you, appreciate you, love you, because it just seems like every time I'm having one of those moments where I am breaking down and I am losing it, and today included, there you go. And I believe that God just sends angels to lift us up when we need to be lifted. And so, although it seems like people don't care, people care. There are people who care, and it's just about opening yourself up enough to receive it. But I think also just sharing that you need the help. I want to respect your time and also respect, obviously, the time of our listeners. We definitely have to schedule a part 2 because there's so much more to say. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you, if there was one piece of advice that you would give to other women coming up, what would that advice be?
Let go of all the advice. Like, I think that we're so busy trying to get it right all the time that we don't even give ourselves an opportunity to find out who we are. And you do need to bring me back 2-3 more times.
Thank you. I appreciate you. To my listeners, thank you again for joining us. May your hearts be filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days. Sending you love and positive vibes. Till next time.